Let's get moving. The energy that I felt as I walked in and got the chance to see you, the excitement that we feel showing up in a part of Texas that is so often written off or taken for granted. You know, maybe because Democrats traditionally have not done as well as we would have liked them to do in this part of Texas. Democrats, present company excluded, but statewide Democrats, national Democrats, have not been showing up. And that means that Republican contest in November. If there's no one here being accountable to you in a position of public trust, how are you going to get the government that you deserve? But this campaign is different, at least more different than any statewide campaign that we have seen in Texas. We're going everywhere. We're talking to and listening to everyone, writing nobody off, taking no one for granted, and especially interested in those communities that have not had their voice heard, where their votes may not be counted because they are not cast, because people wonder whether it is worth it to do it at all. The margin of defeat for us in Comal County in 2018 was 25,000 votes. Statewide, it was 216,000 votes. It was pretty damn close in terms of, a Texas statewide election. We had the largest voter turnout since 1970. We saw a young voter turnout through the roof. But as I came here today, I wondered, how do we make up this deficit, or at least do a whole hell of a lot better? So in 2020, fast forward 2 years from the 18 election, 25,000 of your neighbors up here in the county today in New Braunfels, they need you to knock on their door, because when the political scientists find their phone numbers and call them up and they say, "Sir, ma'am, why is it that you did not vote in this last election? It was the most consequential presidential election in U.S. history, at least in our lifetimes. What is your answer?" And most of those respondents say, "No one asked me. No one knocked on my door. No one picked up the phone." And in a state that has made it harder than any other, bar none, in which to register to vote or to cast your ballot, where a 95-year-old World War II veteran in February during early voting had his ballot by mail request rejected 3 times. This guy who was willing to lose his life for this country to fight fascism overseas in 1944 on the beaches of Normandy, to defend democracy at home, was unable to participate in an election in this very state. So let us not judge those who did not vote for whatever reason. For some, it's pretty hard right now. But let us show up and help them to do that. If you want to be part of this, you can text the word Texas to 20377. And I encourage you at some point over the course of today's event to do just that. You will get a text back from us that gives you instructions on how to sign up. And then, just so that we're all clear on what's going to be asked of you, this is not just to like the stuff on Facebook or to tweet out our approval. This is the hard work that you actually need to win elections. This is going to a complete stranger's front door, knocking on it, introducing yourself, and in your own words, from your own heart, describing to them why this election matters so much to you. Look, I could air the most brilliant television ad known to humankind. We can have the slickest piece of mail coming into your mailbox. We can tweet the most clever stuff on Twitter and put great social media content up. None of that, and I mean none of that, is as powerful or profound as another human being showing up at your door, face to face, eyeball to eyeball, human being to human being, and connecting with you. I guarantee you, that person whose door you knocked on will never forget the encounter, and there's a great chance that after you have that conversation, they will want to vote, and they'll want to vote with us. So that number is 20377, and if you text the word Texas to it, we'll get you signed up. All right. Some of your friends and family members and neighbors and classmates and colleagues and the folks that you know in your life were not able to be here today. But they're going to ask you, because they know that you were what this guy Beto is all about. And you say, what is he for? There's three things that I want you to keep in mind. The first, he wants to make sure that the best jobs creating in the United States of America are found right here in the state of Texas. And they may say, well, what the hell does that mean? You may be wondering, what the hell does that mean? Give you a couple of ideas of what we could do together for Texas. Right now, we face a shortage of 20,000 nurses in our healthcare system in Texas. My sister is a nurse, and they go from patient to nurse ratios of 1 to 3, 1 to 4. They're now at 1 to 6, 1 to 7. Fewer nurses, taking on a greater burden, higher likelihood that they're going to burn out, leave the profession altogether, or transition into becoming a travel nurse, where they can make 2 to 3 times the money and maybe leave Texas altogether. So if we decide as a state, as a people, not as Democrats, not as Republicans, but as Texans who are concerned about our healthcare prospects going forward, that we're going to fix this, then we can do a few things that I think make a lot of sense. One, it's pretty crazy that we ask these nurses to take on tens of thousands of dollars in debt for the privilege of taking care of us after they finish their education. Given this shortage right now, what if we clear that debt that they're holding and remove it as an obstacle for those who want to come in to the profession, especially if they want to serve in an in-demand profession in an underserved community? I think that is well worth the investment, and the return that we get on that is many times greater than our cost up front. Here's another idea. As I travel the state, I'm meeting 18-year-olds who are going to these early college high schools. And what that means is that next month, as they're walking across the stage at their high school during their graduation, not only do they pick up their diploma, but they're also picking up an associate's degree. Their first 2 years of college are under their belt at no additional cost to them or to their parents. They are ready to go, whether they want to pursue more education or a job and career that really pays. I was in Roscoe, Texas, not too far from Sweetwater, Texas, and I went to their local high school, the Roscoe. Are you from Roscoe? Plowboys and plow girls, yes. You're my plow girl today. Thank you. So, this community, almost every single senior graduates with that associate's degree, which on its own is wonderful. But a significant share of them also graduate with an FAA license, an FAA remote pilot's license at that, so that they can fly the drones that do the inspections on the wind turbines that dot the skyline there, that have deepened the property tax base that allows that independent school district to invest in their students. Now, maybe like this county, I don't know the last time that their county voted for a Democrat. So what we're talking about here is not a solution that came from one party or another. It's just a basic Texas value that we're going to invest in our young people so that when they graduate, they can work a job that pays a living wage. And that's important because there are more people working underneath a living wage in Texas than in any other state. And what does that mean? It means that you're working a second job. It means that you're taking on a third shift. It means that you're on public assistance even if you don't want to be, but you have to be because that's the only way you make ends meet. It means in too many cases you are sleeping in a shelter, or God forbid, but it happens on the streets with your kids. And I've met those families in Texas who are working full-time and do not have a home and are experiencing homelessness right now. So we want to make sure that that job pays. We also want to make sure that it provides the purpose and the function and what is essential to being a human being. I've got 3 kids, 15, 13, 11. That's what I want for them more than anything else. I've told them, and my wife agrees, and maybe she told them, and I agree. Look, we don't care what you do over the course of your life, but we want you to be happy. We want this to be fulfilling, and we hope that what you do makes the world a better place. We all crave that in our lives, and I want to make sure that we find it. So opening up possibilities in Texas for people to do that, whether they want to serve in the United States military, whether they want to take on one of these professions of public service, like being a police officer or a sheriff's deputy, or putting their life on the line in the United States military. Let's make sure that they can do that. But also, in addition, if they do not want to go to college, and let's acknowledge that many young people do not, it's just not for them, and that is by their own choice, let's make sure that there are career opportunities for them as well. In North Texas, I went and visited the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, the IBEW. And these young people who graduate from high school, sometimes even before they've graduated from high school, are entering a 5-year apprenticeship program where they learn how to become a better electrician on their way to becoming a journeyman or a journeywoman. And for those 5 years, in addition to learning, they are also earning. They're working. They're on the site. And I was asking one of these young men at the IBEW Hall what it's like to have a job like this. And he said, hey, Beto, this is not a job for me. This is a career. I cannot wait to get up in the morning and get after it and go to work and learn a little bit more and continue to advance. What I'm learning right now, the skills and the value I have as part of this union, allows me to be competitive anywhere in Texas, anywhere in this country. And he's got what I want, what you desire for your kids and grandkids. It's that fire, it's that purpose, it's that function that I was talking about. So making sure that more Texans can join unions and that we have a right to organize in this state for the benefits, for the pay, but also for the education and the training so that we can actually compete for the jobs that are being created here right now. So that's jobs. We want great jobs. And those are some ideas I have. I'm looking forward to hearing yours. Idea number 2, when folks ask, what is this O'Rourke guy all about? Great schools, great public schools. And great public schools, for me, listen, like most of you, I was educated in a public school in El Paso, Texas, you know, in a schoolhouse that was built in the 1940s or the 1950s. It's since been demolished and rebuilt, and you know, the contractors and the engineers and the architects did really well. The cynic in me wonders, did we really need to do that? But be it as it may, there's a new school building where my 11-year-old is attending that same elementary school. It's called Mesita Elementary in El Paso, Texas. So we're happy he's got a new school building. We love the fact that it is wired for speed. You know, they get online and they receive some of their course materials over the internet, and during the pandemic, they could all learn at a distance. But far beyond the value of the school building and the infrastructure and the technology and the bells and whistles that sometimes, and sometimes not, come with public education in Texas, the essence is the educator, the counselor, the classroom teacher, the school librarian, the people who make public ed possible in the state of Texas. I would argue, some of you may disagree, that we could have a great public school right here in this field. I would love to attend class right here without having to go inside of a building, see this beautiful sky above us, be with friends, and learn from one of the best that we've produced in this state. And that's who our public educators are. I bet every single one of you could name the teacher or teachers who changed your life. For me, it was 6th grade at Mesita Elementary, and it was Mrs. Strummer, who absolutely believed in me in a way that was so powerful. Words will not do this justice, but it caused me to believe in myself. And it also stoked a lifelong love of learning, a curiosity about how the world works and what my part is in it and how I can make it better. That was Mrs. Strummer in 6th grade. I can still remember her name. I can still remember being in that classroom. You all feel the same way about those teachers who made a profound impact in your life as well. So I want you to know this, that right now in Texas, because we have failed to prioritize public ed, half of all school teachers are leaving the profession within the first 5 years of entering it. We are looking at a crisis in public education. That 11-year-old that I'm talking about, Henry, who goes to Mesita, it is now April. He started the school year in August. He has yet to have a permanent teacher in the classroom. It's been one substitute after another, and those subs are doing their best. We are grateful for them, but you all know as well as I do, as well as Henry does, that he and his classmates are not getting the quality of education that they would with a permanent classroom teacher. So why is this happening? Well, it may have something to do in Comal County, one of the fastest independent school districts in terms of growth in the United States of America. The teacher here on average is underpaid by $8,500 against the average teacher nationally. Half of all school teachers in Texas are working that second job or that third job to support their habit of teaching our kids in the classroom. No wonder with that pressure, 2 years of learning loss from COVID, kids who they cannot keep track of because they may have disappeared literally off the grid right now, they are thinking about other careers. And when the governor of this state is attacking them day in and day out. Asking them to not teach a certain version of history, to teach only one that favors some and not others. Asking them to turn in the parents of transgender kids for child abuse in the state of Texas. Asking them to spend months of valuable classroom time in front of those kids preparing for a high-stakes, high-pressure test that in no way effectively measures the potential of that kiddo or the effort expended by that teacher. If I were the governor, I would cancel the STAR test this year so that they could get on connecting with those kids. We are for world-class public schools, and world-class public schools, to me, are not the buildings, they are the educators. And we got to make sure that we have their backs. And one way to show that, in addition to higher teacher pay, replacing the STAR with something that serves as more of a diagnostic that helps teachers and schools instead of punishing them, is also to look at the generation that preceded today's current teachers. It has been since 2004 that retired teachers have received a cost of living adjustment in the state of Texas. Imagine being on a fixed income going all the way back to 2004. Just this year alone, inflation has gone up 8.6% in the state of Texas, and probably even more than that due to some of the things that Greg Abbott has been doing recently. We've got to make sure that these men and women who dedicated the best years of their lives to the kids of this state, I mean, if anyone was concerned about the future of Texas, it was them, that we treat them with the respect and the dignity that they are owed, that we have a cost of living adjustment that takes place every single year going forward because their costs are going up every single year going forward. And when the generation that's in the classroom today and the generation that's thinking about going into the classroom today, when they hear from their parents and grandparents that this state appreciates their service and that there's real reward at the end of the day for giving your life to these kids, well, I think we're going to have a better chance of recruiting and retaining people in these classrooms and doing something that Texas has been on the slide for 7 years, and that is to dramatically increase educational performance, graduation rates, post-secondary education, reading levels in this state. The average fourth grade classroom, 7 out of 10 kids cannot read at grade level in Texas today. It's because we have not made it a priority or a focus or funded it accordingly. When we win this in November, all of that changes. Public ed becomes job number one. And then the last thing, when friends, family members ask, what is this guy all about? Last thing that I want you to share with them is he wants to make sure that we are all healthy enough and well enough to live to our full potential. There is a program you may or may not have heard of called Medicaid. It was actually signed into law by our fellow Texan, Lyndon Baines Johnson, in the summer of 1965. So just to set the stage for you, Medicaid came from Texas, was created by a Texan in the White House, and right now Texas is one of the only states that has failed to accept Medicaid expansion. This was a deal struck more than 10 years ago with almost every other state in the union, where the federal government says, I will pay, right now the deal is 90 cents on the dollar. So 90 cents coming in from DC, we pick up the last 10 cents. If you will expand eligibility. In Texas, that means bringing on 1 million more of our family members, friends, and neighbors onto the rolls so that when they have diabetes, they can afford insulin. And I've met far too many people here with diabetes and glaucoma and worse who literally, but for the lack of insurance and Medicaid expansion, cannot get the treatment and care that will keep them alive. And I guarantee you they are going to die much younger deaths. Their quality of life will be much lower, and it will be much more expensive for all of us to take care of them when the suffering becomes too much and they have to drag themselves to the hospital with no ability to pay. You and I will end up footing that much more expensive bill. And then check this out. Every single one of our neighboring border states, most of them under Republican governors, have already done this. Arkansas, Louisiana, Oklahoma, New Mexico all saw the wisdom in this program. Again, not for Democrats and not from Democrats, but for everyone in their states. If we do that, we expand Medicaid, 10 billion more comes into this state every year, which, to remind us, is our money to begin with. We paid it out in federal income taxes. It comes back to us in Medicaid expansion. We recruit more providers, more nurses, more doctors, more mental health care specialists in a state that ranks 50th in mental health care access, whose largest provider of mental health care services is the county jail system in the state of Texas. We recruit more of these providers, especially to rural and underserved communities, where more than 27 hospitals have closed down in just the last 10 years. Biggest reason given, we did not expand Medicaid. They didn't have the resources to stay in the black, and they had to close their doors. In addition to all of that, we're going to be able to lower your property taxes, because again, when those who are uninsured seek care, we end up paying for it one way or another, and for many of us, that is through our local county hospital district. That's what it is for me in El Paso, may be the same for you here. So that idea of expanding Medicaid, of making sure that you can see a doctor and fill a prescription and take your kiddo to a mental health care provider in the 9th largest economy on the planet, that's an idea that I think all of us can get around, regardless of party affiliation, geography, or any other difference. Those three things: great jobs, world-class schools, and the ability to see a doctor. I think we as Texans can agree on that much. Are you all with me on this? That is what we're for. That is what we're for as Texans. Not as Democrats and not as Republicans, as Texans. Why have we not gotten that done yet? We have a governor today who is more intent on further dividing and fracturing this already polarized state. Instead of bringing us together as we just proposed on the big things that we can agree on, he's playing small ball politics with the lives of the people of Texas. Give you some examples which you know all too well. Last February, when the temperature dropped in Texas, as it did through much of the rest of the country, uniquely Texas, the energy capital of the world, could not keep the lights on, or the heat running, or the water flowing, because it had frozen in the pipes, which were soon to burst and cause tens of billions of dollars in property damage across this state. The governor, Greg Abbott, was warned repeatedly before February, we have underlying vulnerabilities in that grid. We almost lost the grid in 2011. We got to fix it. But he chose to ignore them and instead focus on the profits of his greatest benefactors, these CEOs and corporations in the oil and gas business. Those who were responsible for delivering the fuel to power generators that spin off the electricity that we all depend on. So, predictably, when the temperature dropped and we had that stress on the system, it failed. And more than 700 of our fellow Texans lost their lives. An 11-year-old boy in Conroe, whose mother could not pile enough blankets on his shivering body, who froze to death in his own home. A Vietnam-era veteran who could no longer charge his oxygen tank inside, so took it out to his truck, was going to run the engine, see if he could do it there. They found him dead in the front seat of hypothermia. Those stories repeat over and over and over again, hundreds of times. And it was due to one person and one person alone and the decisions that they made. But to add insult to injury, that grid is still not fixed in the state of Texas. We are all paying the price for the billions of dollars that was stolen by us, by those energy traders. They took $11 billion over the course of 5 days in February, when people were literally freezing to death in their homes, I would argue illegally. But instead of getting that money back for us, the governor has chosen to pass the buck onto us. Your electricity bills are going up on average $50 a month, every single month going forward for the next 20 years. On my way over here, I was grabbing a cup of coffee just outside of town, and this guy recognized me, stopped me, said, "Hey, can I take my picture with you?" He builds pools, and I'm happy to give you his business card afterwards if anybody needs a pool. But he said, "Hey," I said, "how's your business right now?" He said, "Well, it's booming. I've got a lot of demand, but my costs are going through the roof." He said a 2-inch diameter, 20-inch pipe used to cost him $4. It now costs him $45. And I said, "Well, why is that? I know we've got supply chain problems in this country. Is that it?" He said, "No, there was so much damage from that winter storm last February, so many pipes that burst. I cannot get it for the business that I have right now. I've lost so many customers as a result." When you hear about inflation, just remember the name Greg Abbott. It's what that guy is paying to be able to supply his customers. It's what we are paying when we're paying our utility bill. It's what you will be paying in property taxes after you just got your appraisals. Property taxes up $20 billion in the state of Texas since this guy took office. That's an increase of 40%. That sounds a lot like inflation to me. And then this stunt that he pulled the last couple of weeks at the U.S.-Mexico border, shutting down all trade from our largest trading partner, upon whom 600,000 jobs in the state of Texas depend. We import 2/3 of all of our produce in Texas from Mexico. Literally, it rotted on the ports of entry so he could pull a stunt and score some points on Tucker Carlson, Fox News. But all of us ended up holding the bag. And listen, don't take my word for it. Listen to that flaming liberal, the statewide elected Republican agricultural commissioner, Sid Miller, who called this economy killing and absolutely ridiculed and lit up Greg Abbott on national TV because it was hurting people here in the state, and at least he had the good conscience and good form to do something about it. So you're not focused on creating jobs when you're jacking people's price of living here in the state of Texas and causing inflation so that you can pull political stunts. You're not helping to improve our public schools or get in the backs of our teachers when you are forcing every single woman here to think about whether she wants to go to jail for exercising her constitutional right to make her own reproductive health care decision. And to put a $10,000 bounty on the back of anyone who tries to assist any woman in the state of Texas. Folks, this is happening in the midst of a maternal mortality crisis that is as deadly here in Texas as it is anywhere in the developed world, and it is 3 times as deadly for black women in the state of Texas as it is for white women. And let me tell you why. Not only can you not get an abortion when all the reproductive health care clinics have closed down in Texas, but try getting a cervical cancer screen, try getting reproductive health care help, try getting help with your pregnancy when you live in the least insured state in the country, where if you're in a rural or remote community, you may be driving now 120, 200 miles to see that provider. This is immoral. This is not just, and this is literally killing our fellow Texans right now. That's why when we win, every woman makes her own decisions about her own body, her own health care, and her own future forever going forward. And then I know you cannot have escaped this one because for some reason the governor has decided these are our public enemies number one, though they are not. This fixation on transgender kids. Calling special sessions to pursue them, to attack them. These kids who are literally among the most vulnerable. The rates of suicidal ideation, unfortunately, the rates of suicide, we hate to say this out loud, but if we don't and fail to confront it, it will continue to get worse. These kids and their parents who are trying to navigate one of the toughest moments in the life of a child, I can only imagine as a parent of 3 what that would be like. These parents who love the hell out of these kids and will do anything for them and are just trying to understand. What Abbott is doing now is he's pursuing them with criminal charges of child abuse. And if those charges are sustained, those kids are taken from that loving household and away from their loving parents, placed into a foster care system that has 30,000 kids in it so far, a foster care system that is so badly run by this governor that, get this, 100 kids died last year in CPS custody and care. Not through any fault of the CPS caseworkers, like those teachers and nurses I'm talking about. There are too few of them for too much work. We need to make sure that we have their backs, help them out as well. But where the governor could be focusing on fixing a problem, instead he chooses to make it worse. Look, when we win this, we're going to remind our fellow Texans we're a big state, and we're big enough for all of us, and we're proud of each and every single one of us. And if someone's attacking you, I'm going to have your back and fight on your behalf. So this is what the governor of the state of Texas is doing, instead of focusing on jobs, on great schools, on the ability to see a doctor. Last thing that I want to share with you, and then we're going to turn the mic over to you. What are we going to do about this? So I suggested earlier you text Texas to 20377. That's a great start. I mentioned just how many people were eligible to vote in 2020 and did not, and how many more have gone on to the rolls? 11,000 just in this county alone. This is just one of the 254 counties of Texas, and we only lost by 216,000 votes 4 years ago. This is wholly within our power. If we will get out of our head any idea that anyone's going to ride to the rescue for Texas, maybe the Department of Justice on these voting rights violations, I'd love them to. It does not look like they're going to. We will not hold our breath. It would be nice if there was $1 billion in this campaign that was going to allow us to reach every single voter on social media, TV, and every other manner. That is also probably not going to happen, although we could use every contribution that you bring in and we'll make the most of it. But really, the only thing that's going to win this race is all of us. It will not be the candidate. It will not be his political party. It will be the people of Texas. And you have to think through, given what is at stake right now in this state, arguably the most consequential election in Texas history, at least during our lifetime, what it is you are willing to do so that you can look yourself in the eye, you can look your kids in the eye, you can look your grandkids in the eye, you can face the judgment of future generations who I guarantee you will look back on 2022 and the people who lived here in Texas and ask, when all of this was happening, we just described today, when all that opportunity was before us, what did they do? And we want to be able to return the answer that we won this election. We did it for and by the people of Texas, and we did it by knocking on doors, meeting those voters, and turning them out. And last thing, wouldn't it be, in the most voter-suppressed state in the Union, some pretty powerful poetic justice if the very people targeted for suppression and intimidation ended up being the margin of victory on the 8th of November of this year? We are going to make it happen. Thank you so much for having us out. Super, super grateful to Melanie, to Brittany, to everybody who's here. I want to thank the Democratic Women's Club, the Democratic organizations, the county party, and the precinct chairs. You all are amazing. Cynthia Cano is right here. We're going to switch mics. If you have a question or a comment or a suggestion, I'm going to give her this mic to give to you. You have an alcohol wipe to get all of my germs off this microphone, and she'll wipe it down each time just to be clear, and then we'll get as many people into the conversation. Okay, Cynthia, here we go.
All right, if you have a question, raise your hand. I will go to you. I see my first question over there. I'm going to run.
Check.
Here we go. This is such a great crowd, I got to tell y'all. Yeah. So happy to be here.
Cynthia, I think this is just where they hang out every Saturday afternoon. We just happen to come in on it.
What are you going to do about the National Guard that's been deployed to the border for over a year? We're 7, at least that I know of. Soldiers have died. My son just got pulled back from there after a year, and now he's headed to Guatemala. I'm tired of Abbott using the Guard with no plans and no way to take care of it.
Thank you so much for the question, and also thank you for serving. As we all know, when anyone in a given family in Texas serves this country in the Guard, in the United States military, it is the entire family that is serving. And I appreciate you asking the question. Just to make sure everybody understands, the governor involuntarily activated 10,000 members of the National Guard here in the state of Texas, not to address a hurricane like Harvey in 2017, not when the power literally went out and 700 people died last February. He did it again to score political points on the border. Now how do I know that? And why do I think that that's not an appropriate use of the Guard? I've been down to Del Rio and to Zapata and to Laredo and to every single part of the U.S.-Mexico border expressly to meet with these guardsmen and these guardswomen to ask them what their deployment has been like. As you probably know from listening to your son, initially they were packed into trailers, more than 20 of them living just feet apart, giving each other COVID almost on a daily basis. They were posted out in Humvees on right-of-way that the state of Texas could obtain, regardless of whether or not it was literally on the U.S.-Mexico border, with no powers to arrest or to detain. Constitutionally, they're unable to do that. At best, they can spot people and radio that in to Customs and Border Protection or to the local county sheriff. And listen, we're grateful for anyone who does that job, was willing to do that job, and in some cases they were able to do that. but every guardsman I have met, to a person, Cynthia behind you can vouch for me, has told me, when I've asked, over the last 6 months, how many migrants have you spotted, drug traffickers, human smugglers? 0. The answer is 0 every single time. 4 of those members of the Guard have taken their own lives since this involuntary deployment. 3 more that we know of right now, have died in what looks like accidental deaths on the border. None of them killed or harmed by a migrant or anybody else coming to this country, seeking asylum, trying to find a better life for themselves and their kids. Having said that, let me acknowledge, we do have real challenges at the border. There are people who are willing to cross fentanyl into this country. There are those who traffic in human beings, and we should remain vigilant and laser focused on stopping that. That's why this stunt is so detrimental. It causes more chaos and confusion on the border. It takes our eye off the real problems that we face, and it fails to demonstrate any leadership at all that we should expect from the governor of Texas, the defining border state in the union. When we win this, and when I am governor, we are going to bring everyone together, regardless of party or geography or any other difference, and we are going to propose, and we're going to do everything we can to force this through, a comprehensive rewrite of our immigration laws to ensure that they match our values, our lived reality, and our priorities in this state. Listening to cotton growers, as Republican as they come in La Mesa, they want a guest worker program because their operations go away the day that immigrants stop showing up, and they want a legal, orderly path for people to come here. Talking to those immigrants in those fields in La Mesa, they love their home country just as much as I love my home country. They want to come here, work, go back to their families, and bring the pay that they've earned. Right now, because of this militarized border, they are forced to stay here and ask their families to come up and join them because they do not want to risk another crossing. We are unintentionally exacerbating a problem that we have here in America. We want to make sure that we are honoring those who seek asylum in this country when they have a legitimate claim. Imagine sending your daughter or your son at the age of 12 years old on a 2,000-mile journey from Guatemala to the front door of our country at the Texas-Mexico border. You would only do that if the only way to keep her alive was to send her on that journey. I've got a 13-year-old home. There's no way we're letting her out of our sight, and the only way we would do that is if to keep her in El Paso would mean her certain death or grave harm coming to her. That is why, by and large, most of these people are making this journey right now. And listen, I know not all Democrats want to hear this point, but let me say this out loud. If someone does not have a legitimate asylum claim and does not have a visa and is not willing to follow our laws, then they should also be returned back to their home country. We have to follow the laws. We have to rewrite the laws to make sure they fit our values, and I'm confident that the people of Texas can do this. If I were governor, I would end the involuntary activation of these Guard members, bring them home to their families. Thank you for asking. Thank you.
Thank you for recognizing our teachers who are criminally underpaid, underappreciated, and completely overworked. They're the best. We deserve better. My question is about what are you going to do about fixing the foster care / juvenile justice system? I read about a home that was for a young girl who had been sex trafficked, and that the people in charge of that home were actually caught sex trafficking the same girls that they were supposed to be helping. Well, we have a state that is criminalizing abortion, and a lot of these girls, and they are girls under 18, 16, we have them in sex trafficking rings, and we take them from places and then put them someplace where they're supposed to be safe, where we are supposed to be caring for them, and then the people who are supposed to be caring for them are doing the same thing. What are we going to do about that?
Can you briefly?
Yes, I'll restate the question. What are we going to do about this broken foster care system and child protective services, where in those offices tonight, while we're safe and snug in our beds at home, there will be kids foster kids who were taken from their families, have already gone through extraordinary trauma, who will be sleeping on the desks, under the tables, in the hallways, because we have so many children without placement in the state of Texas. And listen, that isn't just how things roll in Texas or in America or in the developed world. It is for lack of political will and focus and accountability. In the 9th largest economy on the planet, there is no lack of resources to take care of these kids right now, but every single year that Abbott has been in office, it has gotten worse and worse and worse. 6 years ago, Judge Jack, looking at the CPS system, said these kids age out more damaged than when they went in. Then just this last January, she said that situation has gone from bad to worse. She's the one from whom we learned that 100 kids died last year. And to the woman's question, hundreds more were trafficked while we had custody of them. That's you and me, the people of the state of Texas, through our governor and CPS. We then privatized this care, this facility in Bastrop, which took in a number of young girls, 11, 12, 13 years old, who had been trafficked for sex outside of that facility, were taken into that facility. Some of those girls alleged, once in the custody and care of that privatized provider contracted by the state of Texas, they were trafficked again. Abbott ordered the Texas Rangers to go in and conduct an investigation. Somehow they were able to do that investigation in like a day or two, just a couple of days. Nothing to see here, folks. Everything's okay. Although we later learn, we don't know yet for sure. I don't know that it's been substantiated that these girls have been trafficked again, but they're willing to admit that they took pictures of them in the nude and then were able to distribute them on the internet. So there is child pornography working out of that facility in Bastrop, or at least there was. That is just a small window into a horrifying thing that is happening in the state of Texas. You asked for the solution. So earlier we mentioned we need more CPS workers. They need to be better paid. The workers that I have met, there was one who came up to me at an event like this in Abilene, through tears, said, I just cannot take this anymore. As my colleagues leave, I'm responsible for more and more of those kids. No human being can take care of this many kids at the time. She substantiated that they're sleeping in offices, and she said, I want to leave, but I can't, because who's going to take care of those kids? So we should get her more help. We should also look at best practices in other states. When we can, if we have to take that child from their parents, they're in an abusive situation, we should do a better job of looking to relatives who might be able to provide a safe home for them. In some cases, we can intervene with the parents and address issues with mental health, access to health care, just resources to make sure they can keep a roof over their head. That may sound expensive. It is a lot cheaper than what we are going to do to that kid if we put them into the foster care system while they still have loving parents who just aren't able to make ends meet for them right now. And this great line right here, foster the families, not the children. This is something that has worked in other states and other places. And then we've got to support the foster parents, okay? There are a lot of great foster parents in the state of Texas who, to a person, have told me that they're jumping through every single hoop invented in order to do the right thing. Let's make it a little bit easier on them. We still do our due diligence. We still make sure that is a safe home. But if someone's willing to step up and provide that loving home, let's get it done. And then last thing, because it's connected, let us, at a minimum, not take those kids from parents just because they're transgender and place them into that foster care system. That is almost unbelievable that it is happening in the state of Texas right now. Thanks for asking.
Okay, I see all your hands up. I'm going to do my best to get to as many of you as I can. Here is our next question.
Hi, I just wanted to apologize to your campaign there for the fiasco it took to get you here. But one of the things that happened to the campaign happens to all of us as Democrats living in this county. And the important thing is after voting, right, first, the next most important thing you need to do is to help us get this thing fixed from the ground level. And when I say the ground level, I'm talking about your front yard, your doorstep, right? Get involved at your precinct level. Contact your precinct chair, build your precinct committee. Let's let Democrats exist in Comal County again, because we can't win elections if our Democrats are voting from the closet. We need to insist that the normal American political process includes two parties and different perspectives, and we live here and we have a different point of view than other people do, and it's important that all of you, everybody here, please get in touch with your precinct chair. If you don't have a precinct chair, get in touch with me and I'll make you a precinct chair. I love it. But that's it. Thank you very much.
Hey, thank you for that comment. It's great. I'll tell you what, there's real power in what the gentleman just said. There are so many events like this one. When we were in Olney, Texas, or Childress, Texas, or Shamrock, Texas, or Weatherford, Texas, or you name it, Dalhart, Texas, and folks show up and there's this shock of recognition of like, holy shit, I had no idea that there were other Democrats, or at least other people who were willing to hear a Democrat in my community. Let's show up for one another. And that will also give people permission to believe and permission to act on that belief by actually voting, because I guarantee you've got friends who are Democrats who say, oh, what's it matter at the end of the day whether I vote or not? I'm not going to get my hopes up and have them dashed. I've got too many broken hearts in my life. I don't want to get broken again by these Democrats in Comal County. Show them that there are more of us than they ever knew, and that's going to give them the courage to put a sign on their front yard, to get out and knock on doors, and to vote. That's the most important thing that we need today. Thank you.
Right, here you go.
Hi, I'm a junior at Texas State University.
Go Bobcats!
I live here in New Braunfels, and it should take me 30 minutes to get up to San Marcos. Sometimes it takes me 2, 3, 4 times that long to get to my university. I have friends, professors, students that I tutor who they have to drive hours to get to the university or to their job. As governor, I'm wondering what you're going to do to fix our roads, to fix the traffic on I-35, to provide free and accessible transportation from San Antonio to Austin.
Thank you. Thank you for the question. Go Bobcats. I had the chance to teach at Texas State last year, and it was one of the best experiences of my life. Extraordinary students and faculty there. Second to you, I think I've traveled these Texas roads more than almost anybody in the state of Texas, right? I literally know every inch of Texas highway because I've been to each one of the counties many times over now. We were coming to an event yesterday in San Antonio, and we were a half hour late. We were on target to be a half hour early. It added an hour to our travel time. Now, one, that's a frustration and an inconvenience for us. Two, it costs us a little bit more to burn that gasoline when we're not moving to our destination. Three, it was happening on Earth Day, and so we were sending all that stuff up to break down the ozone layer and increase the warming that we're seeing on this planet. And four, it's not befitting of, I keep mentioning it's the 9th largest economy on the planet, and we're Texans, we're not comfortable being the 9th largest. We want to be the 8th and the 7th and the 6th and work our way all the way up to number 1. We're not going to do that if we do not have the infrastructure in this state to be able to get goods to market, or people to their destinations, or young people to their education, or whatever it is that we want to do to be better for ourselves and to be better for everyone else. This is another big opportunity cost wasted by our current governor. If he were not so interested in the culture wars and scoring these points and pulling these stunts, he'd focus on investment of infrastructure where it is needed. He'd also make sure there's some accountability for how that money is spent. I just saw the end of the fiscal year report for TxDOT. On their balance sheet, the billions that they have left over unspent today, with these pressing needs going on here in your community. I was in the Rio Grande Valley, so in Edinburgh and McAllen, that area, they're not even connected to the interstate highway system. Literally not in Texas in the year of our Lord 2022. We have the needs here. Thank God we have a president who is willing to work with Republicans and Democrats alike to pass bipartisan infrastructure in the United States of America. And we have a governor who's literally talking to agency heads about rejecting the money coming to Texas. You cannot believe this. It is stranger than fiction, but it is Greg Abbott, and it is happening right now. Another reason why we've got to win this race and make these investments so that you can get to school on time. Thank you for asking. Appreciate it.
Good afternoon. My name is Singh, and I'm one of the legal immigrants since 2001, and I've been voting ever since for Democrats. My question for you is that I always have a real concerns about those people that who are one issues or single issues voters, and so in particular right now I'm real concerns about the women's right and the privacy right, and in particular the abortion, because I have a lot of friends that they can be easily democratic, but then because of that issue of abortion, then they vote for the Republicans. So do you have any strategies or any particular voice that you want to speak for those people that who are pro-abortion in that sense?
Thank you. Thanks for asking the question, Sing. Here are some thoughts, and this is just based on conversations I've had with people across the state and conversations I've had with my mom, who raised me as a Catholic, and she is the most devoted Catholic I know, at least in my life. And we don't see eye to eye on this. And one of the things that, or maybe on every aspect of this, one of the things, though, that I've learned from that relationship, and then just learned in talking to and listening to people across Texas, is we should never judge somebody else for the views that they hold. They're personally held, they're strongly held. There's no value in it because you're not going to shake them. You're really just going to turn them off or push them into a corner. Instead, I think there's always the greatest value in finding some common ground. And to put it in church terms that my mom would understand, we're not so much interested in heretics as we are in converts, or at least being able to collaborate and work with people and even compromise. And this is worth bearing in mind, because when we win, there's a good chance we're going to be working with a divided legislature, or maybe a legislature completely controlled by Republicans. So where's the common ground on this? Here are the couple thoughts. I think when I talk with my mom and I say, listen, maybe against the best of intentions, closing down all these reproductive health care clinics, it's exacerbated that maternal mortality crisis that I mentioned to you earlier. And when she hears that and understands that women are dying unnecessarily in the state of Texas, it's a different kind of conversation. When I say, hey mom, when you shut down all these reproductive health care clinics and young people cannot get reproductive or family planning guidance or advice or help at all, we now lead the country in the rate of teen pregnancy, and we now lead the country in the rate of repeat teen pregnancy. Mom, that can't be what you want. She kind of agrees with me on that. And then I just talk about the fact that, look, this has been the law of the land for the last 49 years. And unless and until the Supreme Court or the United States Congress decides differently, we are a nation of laws, and we should honor those laws. And what Texas has done so far, given that anti-abortion bill that makes no exception for incest or rape, just so that everyone's on the same page, what we've done is essentially broken the law, or decided that we are above or apart from the law in the state of Texas. And that can't be right either. And I think those are areas of common ground. Again, I may not get 100% of what I think is perfect, but if we do not allow the perfect to become the enemy of the good, and we draw out the common ground where we can at least start from, I think we can make it better than what it is today. So thanks, Sing, for asking the question. Appreciate that.
Okay, I have time for a few more questions.
Thank you, Cynthia.
Speaking of single-issue voters, many of us here remember back during the presidential primary the unspeakable tragedy that happened in El Paso, the shooting that I can't begin to imagine the trauma that you experienced there. In the aftermath, you said we are going to confiscate these weapons. My question to you is, what is your planned response when Greg Abbott blankets the airwaves 24/7 saying Pato is coming for your guns? Because that is coming.
Thank you for asking the question. Listen, we want to make sure that we are electing people into positions of public trust who have the courage of their convictions. If we wait to poll test everything that we say or believe in, then how can you ever trust a person to do what's right when it really counts? When 23 of my neighbors were slaughtered in a Walmart a little more than 2 years ago for having brown skin by someone who said that he came to repel the invasion of Hispanics that were going to politically take over the state of Texas. Someone who, by the way, echoed in the manifesto that he published before walking into that Walmart in El Paso phrases used by the current governor of the state of Texas. The governor who days before that shooting said, we've got to defend ourselves. take matters into our own hands, talking about immigrants and asylum seekers and refugees coming into America. Well, this guy heard him and the former president loud and clear, took an AK-47, a weapon originally designed for use on a battlefield, because that high impact, high velocity round just shreds everything inside of you. You bleed out before we can get you back up and keep you alive. He takes that into that Walmart and just murders people. It's a Saturday before school starts that next Monday. So it's grandparents and parents with their kids and grandkids buying backpacks and notebooks and pencils and pens and all the stuff that they're going to need when school starts that next week. And I flew home that day as soon as I heard that this was happening. And I remember meeting a woman in the waiting room of the University Medical Center. Her husband had been in surgery for the last 8 hours. She had no idea whether he was going to survive. But she asked me, why do we need these kinds of guns? And man, that question haunted me. And you mentioned I happened to be in a political campaign at the time, and people doing their job on the campaign said, do not touch that with a 10-foot pole. That is not going to be a winner for you in this race. But I felt more accountability from her than I did the polls or even our outcome and prospects in that race. And I just said, listen, no one should have any kind of weapon designed for use to kill people and to kill people only. You don't need it for hunting. There are some who say they need it to hunt feral hogs. And I understand that's an invasive species and a real problem in Texas. But as the science teacher at Roscoe High said to me when this came up in that classroom, if you need an AR-15 to shoot that feral hog, you were a worse shot than I thought you were to begin with. So there's no need for it. But I will do this, and this is important. I want to acknowledge that there may be some among us right now who own AR-15s and AK-47s, and certainly there are in the community, and we should respect that. And for the most part, people who have them use them in a responsible way. Often they lock them up to make sure that their kids cannot get a handle on them. They would never dream of using it against another human being. It's just that after El Paso and Midland, Odessa, the next month, where 8 people were killed, after Sutherland Springs, after Santa Fe High School, those are 4 of the worst mass shootings in U.S. history. They took place in this state just over the last 5 years. As this continues to happen, I talked about that judgment of history and our kids and looking ourselves in the mirror. We are fools to think that this will not continue to happen going forward. So I want to make sure that you understand why I feel this way, because for some people it troubles them, and I understand that. It troubles them politically. I cannot tell you the number of people who came up and said, I agree with everything that you say on this, Beto, but I just don't think this is a winning issue in the state of Texas. Well, listen, I'm always going to be straight with you. I'm always going to be honest with you. I'm always going to do my best to fight for, protect, and defend the people of Texas. But I want you to know this as well. There is more common ground and more that unites us on this issue than will divide us or separate us. The things that we do have agreement from Republicans, gun owners, and non-gun owners alike on include universal background checks, which are popular throughout the state of Texas, would have prevented that Midland, Odessa shooting. We agree on safe storage laws, which would have protected those kids at Santa Fe High School. It was one of their classmates who got their hands on their parents' unsecured weapons. Now, that doesn't take away your Second Amendment right. It maybe is maybe a little bit of an inconvenience, I guess, I don't know. But how much more of an inconvenience if your child gets her hands on that gun and shoots herself or her little brother or somebody at that school? Again, we hate to say this out loud, but it happens all the damn time in the state of Texas, and we can do something about it. We don't have to accept it as our future or our fortune or our fate. And last thing, and I want you to share this with your friends when this stuff comes up. We used to have a license to carry program in the state of Texas that was the pride of many across the country because it required a background check and training if you want to carry a gun in public, right? And most of us could get behind that, myself included. For some reason, the governor felt like he had to do away with that, chuck this proud, long tradition of responsible gun ownership in Texas, and replace it with something called permitless carry that allows anyone to carry a gun loaded on our streets without a background check, without training, without any vetting whatsoever. 35,000 people over the last 5 years were denied a license to carry in Texas because law enforcement deemed them too dangerous to themselves or to the people around them. Tens of thousands more never applied for a license to carry because they knew damn well they would never pass the background check. Now all of them are carrying guns on our streets, convicted criminals, people who abuse their spouses, folks who killed other people. There is no check on this right now in the state of Texas. And you know who opposed permitless carry more than anyone else? Police officers, sheriff's deputies, and law enforcement in the state of Texas. Greg Abbott turned his back on them. More cops and sheriff's deputies have been gunned down in this state than any other state. So when this debate comes up, because that was the context in which you provided the question, I'm ready for it. I want to make sure that Greg Abbott answers to why he turned his back on those members of law enforcement who put their lives on the line every day for us. Thank you for asking the question.
You're right. For being so patient with me, I'm going to try in the next 10 minutes to get to as many.
Given the challenges you've had from Comal County in getting a public venue, I'd like to ask if you up there have been similar issues in other towns or cities in Texas.
You know, by issues, if you mean this extraordinary hospitality that you all have provided here today, I don't think we've seen anything like this in our travels across the state of Texas. No, you know what? I mentioned my mom raised us Catholic. I don't think there are any accidents. I mean, I think this is where we were supposed to be today. Looking out on you all, you're smiling, you're looking great. Air temperature is perfect. What you've done with the weather today could not be improved upon. I think the path to get here to the woman's question just demonstrates what we're up against, right? That this is not going to be easy. Listen, if this were easy, it would not have been 32 years since we last elected a Democrat to the governor's office. It happened to be the best ever, Ann Richards. We're following in some pretty amazing footsteps right now. But right, this just makes the victory all that sweeter. I mean, if this was a movie, we want these scenes in the movie. We want to have struggled for it, fought for it, worked for it, sacrificed for it. That's what we're all doing right now. And again, I want to make clear, I'm asking you to do this in the campaign. It will not be the candidate. I cannot repeat this enough. There's nothing that I could do on my own that could win this race. It has got to be all of us, and I need all of us to step up and join this campaign. Thanks for asking the question.
As a transsexual person, I would like to say thank you for being someone who, at best, does not just sleep at the end of the world. As far as my question, you mentioned erasing student debt for nurses. Would you also consider erasing student debt for teachers? Seeing as how they are also a very essential part of our community.
Someone mentioned social workers. Let's think about. Let me tell you a quick story. I promise, Cynthia, it'll be quick. When I was taking my 11-year-old on the road with me and his mom, Amy, it was his spring break. Which you can imagine he was kind of bummed that was how he was going to be spending that week. But we got to go to all these towns together, and at the end of it, I said, how do you think I did? And he said, you could be a little bit shorter in what you say in your answer. You talk too much. But this story will illustrate the answer to the question. We were in Pecos County, and we were in a really underserved rural part of our state. And we were talking to people about health care, and folks said, look, it's just a struggle. No one takes Medicaid or Medicare. There aren't even any doctors here. And there was a young man who stood up and said, actually, I am a doctor, and I do take Medicare and Medicaid, and even if you don't have that or any other form of insurance, I will take care of you. And I thought it was beautiful. I went up to him, introduced myself, and I said, tell me your story. So it happens that long ago, and not anymore in the state of Texas, we had a program called the Rural Scholars Program. And if you were willing to commit 6 years of your life to practicing medicine in the rural county from which you came, we, the state of Texas, the people of Texas, and your local county would pay the full ride for medical school. So for the bargain price of a medical school education, you get a full-time provider growing one of your own to come back for 6 years. And the kicker for me that day was he was in his 9th year back in the community. He'd married his high school sweetheart. They were raising kids there. They were going nowhere. They were going to stay right there. I loved it. It was so beautiful. And it has made me think about not only reviving that program, which has since been closed, but applying that to some of these other professions that we care so much about. So if you are a school teacher, I mean, on top of everything that I talked about earlier, in addition to all that, we ask you to take tens of thousands of dollars in debt on to be able to teach our kids. So what if we wiped clear that debt and then moved the debt out of the way as an obstacle at a time that we're losing thousands of teachers across the state? Remember, 50% within the first 5 years. Everything we've invested in those teachers is gone as soon as they go out the door. So we are losing resources right now at a frightening rate. I'd rather invest those resources to make sure that you stay in that profession for as long as we can keep you. So yes, I think that's a wonderful idea. That's something I would love to be able to move forward on. Thanks for asking.
Again, thank you all so much for your patience with me. I really apologize if I wasn't able to get to, these are going to be our last two, and then we're going to be able to stay for just a little bit, and we'll take pictures if you'd like, and say hi if you'd like.
Good afternoon.
Afternoon.
I am a retired CEO of a community health center. You may know it as an FQHC, and actually met you in Washington when I was with the TAC entourage. But anyway, the community health centers have seen in the last 4 years particularly programs being slashed from the Health and Human Services Department for things that you're talking about. Keeping doctors in our state, leaving in droves because they can get paid better somewhere else, especially in the rural areas. And different kind of health programs and mental health programs. As governor, how would you address the Health and Human Services who puts the grants up for people like the community health center people to apply for?
I want to make sure that I have a chance to work with you and others who will understand this far better than I ever will. This week I met with an organization you're probably familiar with. It was a Texas organization of rural and community hospitals. And these are folks from all over the rural communities in the state of Texas who are leaders like you are on these issues that they know best. We went through 1115 waivers. We went through what Medicaid expansion would mean. We went through these 27 rural hospital closures over the last decade. And then we went through in very personal terms what it's like to lose that hospital or health care or that federal clinic in your community. What that does to your ability to retain that teacher who says, you know what, if I have to drive 100 miles to get to the hospital because this one closed down, I'm moving somewhere else. So just retaining talent and our kids and grandkids in our communities, that is all part of the mix as well. Hearing a story from a woman in Presidio who told me that her brother was delivered by the veterinarian because there wasn't a doctor for hundreds of miles away. So she is sending her son to medical school. She's doing her own Grow Your Own program on the commitment that he come back to Presidio and practice medicine there. I want to be a partner to local communities and to people who understand far better the issues that are most important to their counties and to their cities. You've got a governor right now who's doing the opposite. You remember the days when local control was the watchword of the Republican Party? Well, now the governor won't allow local communities to decide how they're going to protect their citizens against the deadliest pandemic of the last 100 years. My county judge in El Paso, when El Paso was the deadliest city in America, bar none, for COVID deaths, was fighting the governor who was preventing him from implementing public health safeguards. We had so many people die in El Paso, we set up not one, but 10 mobile morgues in the community. So whether it's on an urgent crisis like that, or whether it's what you're talking about, long-term infrastructure and investment in our communities, I want to work with you and others who understand this to draw down the federal, the state, the local support, and make sure at a minimum more people are on the rolls insured so that we have payers in the mix. And then lastly, and you could advise me on this as well, one of the things I've heard from providers is don't talk about Medicaid expansion if you aren't going to talk about reforming Medicaid and Medicare in Texas, because the reimbursement rates are not sustainable, especially in our rural communities, and we got to get that right as well. So, Cynthia, if you can make sure we get contact information so we can follow up. Thank you for the question.
All right, this is our last question.
All right, I got the honor, huh? So I just want to say, in 2000, my husband and I, we bought our very first home. And at that time, the home cost ratio, average home cost to average income, was 3-to-1. Now, fast forward 20 years later, and my daughter is living in an apartment with roommates paying the same amount of rent that I pay on my mortgage as what she's paying for a bedroom. So the average home cost right now to income is 6-to-1 is how much it's changed. And I look around at my community and I think, where will my daughter be able to buy a home? And I see so many corporations have begun to gobble up homes in our community, just driving homeowners. It's changing our society from a homeowner society to a renter, tenant society. And I want to know, what can we do to change that and make sure that my child has the opportunity to have that American dream of owning their own home like I did and my parents' generations before me.
What a great question. Thank you. That's a good one to end on. You know, part of the problem certainly is one of supply. We're one of, if not the fastest growing states right now in the United States of America. And we made it very hard for local communities because of state interference to build out the housing supply, including affordable housing, in their communities. And therefore, with limited supply, the price continues to skyrocket. That's a big thing. But I'm also hearing from a lot of homeowners and renters who, as we all know, have some of these pass-through costs from their landlords, that because of the inflation that is unique to the state of Texas, I mentioned $20 billion increase in property taxes over just the last 7 years, a 40% increase. They're unable to stay in their homes or to stay in their apartments, or they're seeing apartment rents go through the roof as well. San Antonio, where we were last night, their rates on apartments are increasing faster than they are in New York City right now. That's happening right here in the state of Texas. So how do we fix this and reduce this pressure on property taxpayers, renters, and make home buying a little bit more affordable, especially for those young people we're trying to keep in these communities? I would start with property taxes because that's where we're feeling it the most right now. Part of the reason that we pay such high property tax rates, among the highest in the United States of America, is because we have not done common sense things like expand Medicaid, which would depress property taxes. We also do not require disclosure on sales prices. And listen, that may or may not be a good or a bad thing for you in your specific situation as a homeowner, but for the corporations in the state of Texas, not having to disclose the value of their properties, these are the ones who can hire the lobbyists and the attorneys to fight their valuation at the CAD, at the appraisal district. And if the appraisal district loses, it is forced to pay the court costs of those corporations up to $100,000. So they've got the whip hand, they've got the leverage in this. I was in Port Arthur recently. Their school district just had to cut a check for $30 million to the Motiva Corporation. It's the largest refinery in North America right now. They were able to successfully contest their valuation and get their tax bill down to $30 million. None of us has the capacity or the power or the attorneys to do that. If we require full disclosure, we bring down that pressure, and it makes it a lot more affordable to stay in our homes, to pass our homes on to our kids, and to purchase homes in the first place. We do those two things: increase the housing supply and reduce the property tax pressure in the state of Texas. We're going to make it more affordable for the next generation to own. Thank you for asking the question. I really appreciate it. This is my last request. Cynthia just reminded me of this. Do we have the team ready for this? Which tent ready? Okay. So this blue tent here, if you are interested in hosting a canvas or a block walk, both mean the same thing. In other words, for all these people who just signed up in this county to knock on doors, they need a leader around whom they can rally. So if you're a host, you say, you know what, come to my beautiful backyard next Saturday, or come to the park across my street, or let's meet at this bar for lunch on Saturday, then we'll go knock on some doors. If you're willing to be that leader, and we will train you, it's a very short, quick training. We'll hold your hand through the process, and this is not complicated stuff. It's literally knocking on doors, introducing yourself, and then asking people if they'll commit to voting in this next election, saying what is on your mind from your heart in your own words. But if you're willing to lead that so that people have someone they can go to, I would love for you to sign up and to be a host. And we're asking people who are willing to do that to come to this blue tent. If you're willing to be a host, will you raise your hand? I've got one over here. I've got two. I've got three. I've got four. I've got five. I've got five hosts. I've got six. Forced by your seatmate to raise your hand. You did it last time? Okay, you're switching over. So, to our six hosts, thank you for doing that. If you'll meet Chrissy under the blue tent, we'll get you signed up and we'll get everybody rallied around you for the next block walk. And we're going to be right by this tree, on the other side of this tree, for anybody who'd like to say hello or take a picture. And if you do take a picture, please post it on your favorite social media platform. Tag us. Let's prove that we were here, that we existed, that we defeated the haters, right, today. So thank you all for coming out.